Welcome to another episode of the Empowered Half Hour. I'm so excited to bring you today's guest. If you are watching this, you're going to see her tiara, her crown. It's absolutely beautiful. But I am interviewing today Miss Emily Cram, who is Miss River Days. So we got a double Miss Emily Cram and Miss River Days. Welcome to the show, Emily.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes. So I always like to share with the listeners how we got introduced. And a lot of the listeners know Lene. She's my business partner and she is Miss Behind the Scenes. I love all the like Miss anyway. I'll probably do that like
It's a miss episode.
Yes. I've connected to you through Lene, but she had said to me, she's like, I really think that you should interview Emily because she has quite an impressive background for just graduating high school. You know, you have your accomplishments in pageants, but you also do a lot of other things. And I was reading your bio and I can't wait to get into conversation.
I'm excited. I love Lene.
Oh yeah, she's awesome.
She is.
So let's get started. So, you just won Miss River Days. You are transitioning from high school to college. You have a lot of accomplishments under your belt. I also read that you have overcome some autoimmune stuff with connected tissue. Me too,
Yes.
By the way. So we can get into
Really?
that. Yes. I was like,
wow.
I know. I'm like, hello, connected tissue friend. I'm like, we'll talk about that. But I really want to get into your backstory. Like, what got you into pageants? And I know maybe we can just give a small intro to pageants. So for anybody who's not in the world, people see pageants and they're like, oh, she's so beautiful, or they see the physical aspect of it. But there's a lot of philanthropy. There's a lot of wonderful things that go on behind the scenes or that are part of the pageant process.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe for any listeners that aren't familiar with the pageant, I would say industry, what could you share about them that's more than like what they might see on TV?
So most pageants have a lot of different things that they judge. While I do think your impressions, like your appearance, just like in everyday life gives a certain impression, it's actually not judged by the judges. So interviews are super important, kind of like this. And also your onstage presence, your philanthropy, kind of like you mentioned. It's also about your community action, your voice in the community, your passions. It's also about scholarship. It's about so many different things other than just the way that you look. And I do think that there's kind of a stigma with pageant girl, but when I think about my crown and my sash, I think that was my step into leadership. That was my first step of courage into my passions. And
I love that.
pageantry can give anybody that opportunity, and it can also give an opportunity for anybody to kind of achieve a second education. So most pageants actually offer scholarship money for a higher education.
That's awesome. And I love that you said like wearing your crown and wearing your sash actually makes you feel like you've accomplished your leadership and stuff like that, because there is so much that goes into the background of, and to win too, you really, you have to win, you have to develop yourself in multiple areas, which there's a lot of personal growth and,
Absolutely. So much growth. Yeah, it's also about public speaking, which I think was a big aspect of growth for me. Before I had gone into the pageant industry when I was 17, I had never spoken in front of a crowd, ever. And then I became Miss Minford, which was my school representative, and I spoke in front of a crowd every single day and inevitably got better at that. And I think that's kind of more what pageants are for. It's for personal growth.
I love that so much. So let's transition a little bit into your backstory. What got you into the pageant space in the first place?
I knew I had a message to share, and I knew that I needed a platform to share my story. When I was younger, my parents got a divorce, and it broke my heart. It broke my perception of what love meant to me, and I grieved. And I think people today in society have a hard time dealing with divorce. We can have empathy for someone who loses someone from death. We can have empathy for children going through foster care, but divorce is a little bit hard of a subject to talk about because it's different across the board. Sometimes some families welcome their divorce, but not mine. We all grieved my parents' divorce. And in battling anxiety and depression as an outcome from that divorce, I knew that I needed to share my story. And the divorce also meant a loss of security and safety, and also a lack of support in dealing with my connective tissue disorder, kind of. I know you connect to me. But yeah, so I'm more so talking about my story with grief. And I knew that I needed a place to share that. I knew I needed a place that I could reach people like me. And that's actually why I created my community service initiative, the Lotus Project, which was what sparked my interest.
So tell me a little bit more about the Lotus Project.
The Lotus Project is a mentorship program focused on helping rebuild children from loss and trauma. So we met weekly.
Like, you're such a good person. And like,
Thank
are you what,
you.
like 18, 19?
Yes, I'm 18. I'll be 19 in August.
What? This is incredible. Keep going. Keep going. I'm just like, wow.
So I paired 24 young girls going through a hard time, and that can be a loss of a parent, going into foster care, that can be drug addicted family members, so many various things. And I paired these young girls in my community with strong female role models. Often, trauma, especially childhood trauma, stems from a breakdown in a relationship. So reintroducing these children to a trusted adult is so healing. And so we met weekly and we did relationship building activities like art therapy, journaling, or just getting to know you questions. And I was so excited to share this message that you are not alone and you've never been alone. Now, it's called the Lotus Project because I was in my most difficult times, and a friend said to me, I was saying, I just feel so buried by everything that's happened to me. I feel so defined. And my friend said, Emily, what if you haven't been buried? What if you've just been planted? What if this is your story of growth and blooming? And it struck me.
I want to cry.
It struck me because I thought about all the things that I had gone through in my life, and I thought what had propelled me to healing was actually my relationships in my life. My strong relationship with my sister. My sister is from China. Her name means the lotus flower. And the lotus flower in so many different cultures is a flower that symbolizes rebirth, overcoming. It starts in the mud, grows through the water, and up to the sun. And so in that way, I wanted to share the message that you are more than where you came from.
Oh man, you got me good. I'm like tearing over here and stuff. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And I connect to so much of what you said, but I really think that starting with the grief part of, your story, I think that in young teens and young adults, divorce in the family is very common. Because now it's so common, I agree. I don't think a lot of people are talking about the grief that they feel.
Yeah, I get different responses when people ask me what trauma I went through and I say divorce. But to me, that divorce was kind of a death. It was a death.
It really is. And
Yeah.
it's the death. It's a demarcation in time where something is no longer the way it was.
Yes, exactly.
And it is a loss.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really cool that you're talking about it as a loss and as something you can grieve over because it's so common. It's almost been normalized as, oh, your parents just got divorced
Right,
or something
right.
like that. And there's a lot of people, like you said, relationships are really the influencer of trauma. And it could not only be from physical, emotional, or mental abuse, but it could be the lack of presence, like something,
Yes.
sometimes within a divorce too, parents are consumed at rebuilding their lives. I divorced my first husband and I'm remarried now, but I know there was a survival mode in me that I was working a lot. My kids were
Yes.
smaller. There was nothing I could do to really change the circumstances. At least I thought at the time, but then as maybe a year or so into it, I realized I was like, wow, they really need my presence. Like this
Yes.
was a lot more traumatizing to them than I thought. And so anyway, I just say that because as a mom, I really wish that there had been more support for my kids and even some more awareness and education for me. Not all the focus was around not talking bad about the other parents. But
Right.
there wasn't a lot of information, at least this is years ago for me. I got divorced in 2008, I think. But where I'm going is I think that, you having some type of campaign and voice around it is very needed. So it's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you. And that's actually where I'm headed with my future too, is dealing with women who are facing divorce. I mean, there's been a huge gap filler in how women are treated in the courtroom, but I still think we have a little ways to go. And so I want to be a leader in those conversations by studying law. So I'll be attending The Ohio State University coming up this fall. It truly issues surrounding divorce kind of are my passion. More so is trauma and childhood trauma.
Yeah. And I love that again, because I was saying, like, as a mom, if I would have known that more of I knew my focus needed to be on my kids. So,
Hmm.
for any listeners, not that, but don't get me wrong when I say I wish I would have known some things, because I'm sure there's, speaking to the listeners right now, I'm sure if you've been through a divorce, you're like, oh, I wish I would have known some things too. But
Absolutely.
I wish I would have, during those early months and years, given them a lot more of my uninterrupted time, if that makes sense.
Yes, and
I was
that was what
around
those
a lot.
meetings meant.
Yeah.
It
And so,
was
like,
2 hours of undivided attention from an adult, and not only that, but their adult, because they met with the same mentor weekly.
that's incredible. And I think that as, you mature in your mission and you go to law school and you're working with, women who are divorcing because of the project and the perspective that you went through. I mean, presence, you get to
Yeah.
educate them on the power of presence.
Yes, and I read a quote one time that touched me too. It was, attention is the most rare and pure form of generosity. And I think that also kind of goes along with the Lotus Project and also how it's kind of matured, as you said, because now with the title of Miss Ohio, I'm hoping to speak with legislators and governors and all different educators and first responders about implementing trauma-informed care.
Oh, that is so awesome. That's so awesome. So, what is like one lesson for you or one aha? We've shared a couple, but what's one that's really up for you right now?
I think that different aha moments can kind of grow too. And I think the Lotus Project is very focused too on not isolating in hard times. And I've even caught myself, even as a preacher of that message, I've caught myself this past year isolating myself out of shame and fear and in my hard times pushing away the people who loved me. But a big aha moment, in addition to those other ones, is that the people that love me cannot be scared off, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
actually makes me tear up a little bit because I do think, and listeners out there too, I think that's an important message for you is that as we go through things, we tend to cocoon and
Hmm.
we tend to isolate, and that isolation becomes very lonely.
Yeah.
And I think that's a wonderful awareness to share is that to catch yourself when you notice yourself cocooning or you notice yourself isolating. At first, it might be what you need is to give yourself the own hug. But when
Right.
does it go too far? When are you
Right.
starting to
Yes.
block that the people that do love you out and like, no, 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 I'm okay. When really your soul's like, please, I need some connection right now.
Yes. Connectivity and relationships heal more than anything else.
And I have just a curiosity. So, as you've worked more in connection and rebuilding, has your autoimmune healed as well?
Actually, yes. There's a weird tie to your health, your physical health, and your mental health. When my parents first divorced, I was dealing with a lot of relentless joint dislocations. Those have completely gone away. In the sixth grade, I was even wheeled around because my rib would pop out, or my hips would pop out, or my fingers would pop out. And so my friends were trying to help me out, and they literally rolled me to the next class. Yeah, but through focusing on healing in myself and healing others, I've almost healed my physical state
So
too.
I tear as you
Yeah.
say that because anybody who has had connectivity, like connective tissue stuff,
Yes.
it's very painful. And so
Very.
but I realized that there's this connection to connection, which is weird, but it's true. It's so when I got autoimmune disease, I had gone through a really rough period of time. This is
Yeah.
almost 10 years ago at this point, but I had put myself in a state of overdrive and I was overworking and overstressing and overdoing it completely. And as a result, my relationships were very
Yeah.
disconnected, right? I had another period where I was a very good provider, but I was disconnected from my kids. I was on the verge of divorce with my now husband. So it would have been divorce number 2 for me if I didn't get my stuff together. But I stayed in this state of disarray for like 3 years, and it
Mhm.
caused autoimmune disease.
Absolutely. And they can build and stack too along with that,
It did.
which is why a focus on trauma is so important.
I just love that so much because I ended up getting certified in trauma awareness and all that stuff too, because
Really?
I did, yeah, because I wanted to heal and I wanted to help other people
Yeah.
heal. And what I realized is that as I started to heal myself, and then I also started helping other people heal, I felt more connected. I
Yeah.
felt more connected to myself. I felt more connected to other people. I felt more connected to the universe or God, whatever word, you want to use on
Absolutely.
that. But connection was strong. And once my connection went strong, my ANA started testing negative. And
Wow.
I still have a little bit like of arthritis in some of
Yeah.
my joints, but it's
Yes.
very minimal. I'm off of medication, and I really do feel that the healing came from the emotional work.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes.
I was so excited to talk to you about that when I read that in your bio. I was like, I cannot wait to open up Pandora's box on that conversation.
You don't meet many people who have faced a connective tissue disorder.
Yeah,
You
you don't.
don't.
And it's like one of those things, like yours is definitely more pop out, that like your joints were popping out and ribs. Like I can't
It
even
was rough.
imagine how painful that was.
It was awful. I can't even tell you. I still face some joint dislocations every now and then, but I focused on rebuilding my muscles, which has actually helped keep my joints together.
Yes. And so
Yeah.
I saw that you do a lot of yoga. I'm a Kundalini yoga teacher. So like,
No
I
way.
yeah, I healed
I
a lot.
want to get my yoga
Oh, you
certification.
totally
That's in the
should.
near future.
You totally should, just because of the self connection, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
and then you have tools to help others. But what it did for me and my personal healing
Mm-hmm.
was like, I
Oh.
wouldn't be the person I am today without. Yeah, it is very cool. That's so cool. Like I told you, we
We're like the same.
know. And yeah, and so that's just really wonderful that, I mean, at 18 years old, I feel like you're a very wise 18. And I say that because you are, but I also say that because, and then I get kind of teary saying it, is that it's so needed. Because so many, like my kids are 20 and 22, and I have 4 kids. So I have 2 biologicals, 2 step kids, and all the kids are in between that 20-22 range, and they're all doing great and wonderful and all of that stuff. But I say, like, I'm very familiar with the age group, and I don't feel that there's a lot of information coming to them that's this
Mm.
positive from their own age group, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yes, representation is so important. Absolutely. I come from a place where there's such a rarity of representation, not only with my age group, but also with the opioid epidemic that we're going through. And I think a lot of the children here in my area, Sayada County, are struggling with thinking that they could never make it. They could never do opportunities that they see others on social media. And so that's also part of my drive for going in the pageant industry, is it gave me that platform to show other people that they could go for their dreams. And while pageantry wasn't always my dream, advocacy was. And scholarship was. So, yeah. And Miss America is really, really unique. And it's such a cool experience. Did you know that you are more likely to have a son in the Super Bowl than a daughter in the Miss America organization? I keep tripping over my
No,
words. Yes. Isn't that amazing?
that is
So,
I'm so proud of you.
thank you. Yeah, so that kind of like you said, having someone from this age group is super important, and also having someone from my area of Ohio has
Yeah.
been really unique.
And it's like interesting that you mentioned the opioid epidemic also, because God, I'm like, hey, there's just so much we can connect on.
So
So
much to unpack.
yeah. So in my personal life, both my mom and my dad have passed away,
Mm,
and both of them have passed away with complications to prescription pills.
yes.
And what I learned from that was that, my parents were really cool people. They were full time musicians when I was born, beautifully gifted and things
Mm,
like that. And I feel like the pressure of trying to figure out adulthood, like raising kids, work, bills, things like this. I'm going to use these words disconnection and connection since that's like our theme here.
It
But I
is.
feel like they got very disconnected from the truth of who they were.
Yeah,
And that it started to feel daunting to reconnect. And so prescription pills, even though they had doctors and everything was legally done, and, I didn't have any street drug addiction stuff, but it's still complications with them still led to their passing. It made me really realize that that connection is the most important thing that we can do.
Yeah, and I think sometimes connection also can redefine how we think of an addict also.
I love that.
And I think with the children who are facing addiction in their families, that was an important point, was to not shame those people for the disease that they were facing.
Yeah, they lost their way, and how they get back to being who they are is through positive relationships, positive reinforcement, like you said, presence and different things like that. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So that's like a really big topic for me at this point. Is I always say radiance. So I'm like, I feel like one of my personal missions is to help people return to their radiance.
I love that. That kind of goes with the lotus flower too, because
yes, I have a
returning
lotus
to the sun.
Yes, exactly. I have a lotus tattooed on my back.
Really?
It was like we were meant to meet. Like,
we should have met a long time ago.
I know, seriously. So, all right. Well, you've kind of shared a lot around why you're passionate about doing what you're doing, but I always like to ask the direct question, why are you passionate about your pursuits right now?
I want to show young girls that they're more. That's the heart of my passion right now, my drive. I want to show little 9-year-old Emily that she has come so far, and people just like little 9-year-old Emily, that her chronic illness is not who she is. Her divorce doesn't have to. Have you read? It's called The Scarlet Letter.
Back in high school, yeah.
Yeah, I always talk about this too. Like, I feel like when my parents got a divorce, I got painted with a giant D for divorce, and I walked around with that D forever. But it's breaking those chains and showing young girls that they're not who or what they've gone through.
Damn. Emily, you just have so much light to you and so much like positivity and depth and meaning that I hope you win Miss Ohio, but more importantly, I hope that you never stop sharing your message.
Thank you.
It's really beautiful.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So we're starting to wind down. I knew 30 minutes was going to go by fast.
It did. You were not wrong.
It goes so fast sometimes, especially when the conversation's great. So I always like to wind down by getting into an empowerment statement for the listeners. If you can leave the listeners with an empowering message, what would it be?
I'm going to reiterate kind of what I said before, but my favorite thing that I like to tell people is, you've not been buried, you've been planted. That's my favorite.
It's so beautiful. You haven't been buried, you've been planted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you get a full opportunity to grow and blossom.
Yes.
Absolutely beautiful. Well, if the listeners want to follow you, tell us how we can stay in touch.
The best way to follow my Miss Ohio journey would be on Instagram. So my handle is at Miss River Days Festival OH for Ohio, of course. And the second best way to follow my journey is on Facebook. So right now that's just called Miss River Days 2023. There are 60 Miss River Days in the past. We've had 60 festivals. So I am the 60th queen, so you'll have to type in that year. But absolutely the best ways to follow me are Facebook and Instagram.
All right. And we'll have this in the show notes too for the listeners, so you can click and follow Emily pretty easy. Well, Emily, I hope we stay in touch over and beyond this podcast interview, because you're just an incredible human. It's so weird that there's so many things in common.
I know, it's so funny. We connect on almost anything.
I know. I was like reading your bio and I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to have a great conversation. And it's just really empowering. I'm very proud of you, just your spirit, who you are as a person, and keep shining, girl. You got the whole future ahead of you. It's awesome.
Thank you so much.